marionettes on a string. Want something, give a wiggle. They come a running when you ring. You tied your knot around me, but I slipped that flimsy thing. You try your best to ground me, but I keep on taking wings. Leave me down by the river. Bring your bag and bring your stones. You want blood and not deliver. One of us will take the long way home. Under a waning moon, white as anger, black as fear, wrote my name in salt and ashes, lilac flower and a lover's tear. You cast your pain in circles, you wanna make it disappear. You want a vessel for it. Well, honey, you won't find it here. Leave me down by the river. Bring your bag and bring your stones. You want blood and not deliver. One of us will take the long way home. Leave me down by the river. Bring your bag, bring your stones. You want blood and not deliver. One of us will take the long way home.
Okay. And it's been a little bit of time. Um, things happen as they do. And hopefully, this time, we'll actually have audio when we read through the last chapter. Maybe you can go up a little bit on that. Let's see. Okay. Um, so, last we left off, Jan and Ginny had escaped from this new complex and been through the night and had come across this odd little home with picket fence and two brothers that had agreed to hide them, or at least help them. Um, And that takes us to chapter 15, Breakfast. Big Doc and Helga got out of the van, opened the gate, and started grimly up the walk. Belinsky, Harry, and George pulled from the station wagon, came swiftly through the gate, and fanned across the yard as if heading for the rear of the cottage. Inside, Jan retreated to the turn of the hall with Ginny and stood waiting uneasily for the doorbell to ring. When it did, Sir Reginald answered it. "Yes," he said coldly as he opened the door. "We are searching," came the equally cold tones of Helga, "for two young escapees from the other side of the fence. We have reason to believe they came here." "Here? Escapees? You must be out of your mind, woman. Just who are you?" "I am in charge of the new therapy center over there. I must warn you, these escapees are extremely dangerous. That, my good woman, is your worry, not ours. Now get along with you. You know the agreement. No motor vehicles over here, no wearer of white coats, no intrusions. This is Elysium, and we will not be intruded upon." Sir Reginald paused, then exclaimed, "By my word, if you've had escapees, you should have gone to our constabulary about them. Why didn't you, Answer me that. There's something deucedly wrong here. By Jove, I think I'll call the constabulary myself." Sir Reginald slammed the door, but instead of leaving, he stood behind it, waiting, eyes twinkling. He had not long to wait. There were hurried voices outside, the sound of footsteps, and then motors taking off. The old man chuckled, but his mirth died as he looked at his watch. "My word, we are late! Come, out the back way, fast!" Jan took Ginny's hand and followed the brothers onto a flower garden at the rear of the house, then down a narrow path that led past other flower gardens in the rear of other neat cottages. The morning sun was still only a thin gleam through the trees when they reached another lane. Before crossing it, the brothers crouched behind a shrub like overgrown boys playing cops and robbers, and peered with exaggerated caution to the right and left. "I see the blighters," Sir Roderick suddenly exclaimed in a hoarse whisper. Jan knew it was the younger brother who spoke, only because a minute before he had made the rather startling discovery that Sir Roderick wore tennis shoes, in contrast with his other's entirely proper attire. "Where are they?" growled Sir Reginald. "Down behind the club, making a turn. We better wait till they are out of sight. No use taking chances." "Right-o, they are rascals, no doubt of it. They know the rules, and they left in a flash when I mentioned the constabulary." You really have a police force here?" Jan asked hopefully. No. We want nothing to do with the police. Heaven forbid. Our constabulary is quite private, made up of our own men. Our valets and helpers and what-nots. Jeter's a member. When there is a spot of trouble, one merely presses a button, and they come on the run." Sir Reginald chuckled. "What those blighters don't know is that the entire staff of the constabulary is at the club, waiting to serve us. "But isn't it funny, old boy," said the brother in tennis shoes. "There's deviltry afoot. Our young friends are still in danger. That blighted female who professes to be from the therapy center. A harpy if ever there was one. I could feel the evil in her. Do you know her name, my lad?" "They call her Helga," Jan said. "And that big man with her, that's Dr. Leopold Zworkin. They're the ones who had us kidnapped." The brothers stared at him. "Zworkin, did you say? Zworkin?" He nodded. The brothers looked at each other as if they had heard that the evil one had invaded paradise. They seemed to have forgotten that they were late for breakfast. "The beastly rotter!" exclaimed Sir Roderick. "It was Zworkin that did for poor Bertie." "Burned out his brain," Sir Reginald muddled sadly. "Used to be the life of the party. Who cared he was a bit too active at times? But that bloody Zworkin had to go to the policy board and say that Bertie could be helped by a session with Matilda." Poor Bertie. Matilda? Jan stammered. You know about that thing? Indeed we know. But what can we do? For a moment of bewilderment, Sir Reginald's hands fluttered helplessly. Then a sudden look of resolve came over his long, horsey face. By Jove, he burst out. The blighter's on the wrong side of the fence. We'll fix him. I'll tell the Duchess. Just what good it would do to tell the Duchess was beyond Jan's imagining at the moment. But as the brothers leaped to their feet and started across the lane as fast as their aging limbs could carry them, he caught Ginny's hand again and followed. If his foot still pained him, he was too tired and hungry to know it, and he was lost in a feeling of complete unreality. Hopefully the sprawling stone structures and the trees ahead would offer, at the very least, temporary safety as well as food. Bicycles and tricycles were parked all about the entrance, which was guarded by a pair of aloof stone lions. Just inside, the panting twins paused to regain their composure. I'm going to pause to mute my watch. Sir Reginald said quickly, You must be on your toes with her, Grace. Not only is she quite impossibly rich, but she... Utterly ghastly rich, muttered Sir Roderick. Oil, oil, oil. Built Elysium and endowed it, and fought the policy board to a standstill about our rights. These breakfasts gives them every month. To keep us from getting rusty. Must keep up, you know. Ah, Jeter! A small and very bald footman in immaculate purple livery had appeared in the doorway ahead. I beg pardon, sir, Jeter said smoothly, taking in Jan's clothes, with only a slight widening of the eyes. I've been quite perturbed. You've missed the wine, and her grace is already... Announce us, Sir Reginald ordered. These are extraordinary and extenuating circumstances. This is an emergency. Jeter's mouth opened and closed. He turned quickly and hurried away. As they followed, Jan whispered to Ginny, Have you told Otis where we are? I can't get him, she said almost tearfully. I've tried and tried, but of course it's so terribly early. He wondered if she knew anything about this curious place, but before he could ask, she nodded and managed a tremulous smile, and then Jeter was announcing them. Sir Reginald Weems and Sir Roderick Weems with, guests, Jeter called out, with just the proper tone and flourish. They offer apologies for their tardiness, but there are, extenuating circumstances. An emergency is at hand. They had reached, Jan saw, the entrance to a glittering dining room where a great many well-dressed people were seated at a long, long table presided over by a small, white-haired, doll-like woman in black. Scurrying around the table with glasses and dishes were what would appear to be dozens of footmen in purple livery like Jeter's. No one seemed to pay attention to the first part of Jeter's announcement, but when he came to the word emergency, all action stopped. There was a sudden silence, and every eye was turned upon them. Jan could not help wondering if most of these very elegant people had arrived here on the bicycles and large tricycles parked outside. Then he realized they must have. Emergency? Repeated the doll-like woman at the head of the table. I am aware, Reginald, that the outer world is still too much with us at times. Is this emergency fancy or fact? And who are these odd young guests of yours? The emergency is a fact, Sir Reginald burst out, holding down his excitement with difficulty. We've been invaded, as our guests can tell you. Their names elude me, but they're kidnap victims. They haven't eaten for days, spent the entire night in the rain digging under the fence. Had to give them some of Jeter's clothes. Hold it! Who invaded us? That blighter Zworkin. Zworkin is here? said the doll-like woman, rising slowly. On this side of the fence? On this side of the fence, Your Grace. With a van and a station wagon full of his rascals, added Sir Roderick. There was a sudden commotion near the foot of the table. A broad-shouldered man with a gray goatee who looked, Jan thought, the way all famous explorers should look, flip the page there. Who looked, Jan thought, the way all famous explorers should look, backed cringing from his chair. No, he pleaded. No, don't let them come here. He'll put me in that thing. It's all right, Bertie, the doll-like Duchess assured him softly. We'll never let him touch you. But if he comes here... He'll be after Ginny and me, Jan told him quickly. Anyhow, he can't hurt anyone with Matilda. I smashed it before we escaped. Everyone was suddenly staring at him. You smashed it? The Duchess said slowly. He certainly did, Ginny said. I saw him do it. He completely wrecked it. Bravo! Cried Sir Reginald. Bravo! Cried everyone else, including the footmen. He wrecked Matilda! Quiet, the Duchess ordered. Matilda is disposed of, but Zworkin isn't. He's had the audacity to trespass on our side of the fence, in machines that are strictly forbidden here. We must do something. But first, we must get to the bottom of this. Young man, who are you, and why did Dr. Zworkin kidnap the two of you? I don't know my... He doesn't know who he is, Ginny managed to say. Matilda did something to his memory. I'm Ginny Rhodes. Jan and I were kidnapped because of certain abilities we have. Dr. Zworkin was going to blank out our memories and take us abroad, and make use of us. We'd be on our way now if Jan hadn't done something to their helicopter. But now they've got another machine waiting, a truck to hide us in. And as soon as they catch us, they plant... Only they won't catch you, the Duchess interrupted, smiling sweetly. We'll catch them. She glanced confidently around at the waiting footmen and called abruptly, Woolsey, Clombs, Livermore, Tyler, Shuttleworth. Man your velocipedes and get to the main gate, fast. See that it and the small gate are locked. Stand by and let no one out. If Dr. Zworkin and his cohorts appear, you are to overpower them and bring them here for trial. And Woosley? Yes, Your Grace, replied a tall footman standing near her. They may be desperate to leave, Woolsey, but when they head back to the gate... Let's just try that again. They may be desperate to leave, Woolsey, when they head back to the gate, but I trust you are quite capable of carrying out your assignment. Quite, Your Grace, unless they are armed. May I suggest... Arms are forbidden here, Woolsey, and I doubt even if Zworkin would be so foolish as to resort to them. But this is America, Your Grace, and kidnapping is a very serious crime. May I suggest that the local sheriff be notified, and... You may not. You know very well that we settle our own affairs in Elysium, sorry. But if you feel the need of a backup force, I will grant it. She looked around quickly and called, Downs, Watson, Etheridge, Brooks, Addison. Go with Woolsey's group and help them take Dr. Zworkin. On your way, all of you. As the members of the constabulary hurried out, looking somewhat uneasy, Jan thought, the Duchess turned to a portly footman who evidently was the major domo of the club. Presterville, she ordered, rearrange the table so that these young people may sit on either side of me. The table was speedily rearranged, and Jan, feeling by now that he and Ginny had somehow been caught up and carried away in the current of an impossible dream, found himself sitting on the right of the Duchess and next to a huge and constantly chattering woman in red, who wore an immense red hat of another age covered in roses. "Constantly repressed," she was saying. "Constantly. How anyone manages in that terrible world outside." Jan hardly heard the woman in red, for Jeter had placed a delicious-looking omelet before him, and the Duchess was urging him to eat. "My dear," the Duchess said presently to Ginny, "I do not wish to be unduly inquisitive, but are you blind?" Sort of," Ginny admitted between bites. "I thought so, when I heard your name. Therefore, being a Rhodes, surely you must know all about Elysium." Ginny nodded and smiled. "But Jan doesn't. He doesn't even know where he is." "Then I shall enlighten him. Jan, I must tell you that Heron Rhodes and I are old friends. He helped create Elysium. As he himself said many times, this is the only stronghold of sanity in a mad, mad world. Of course, the world outside, in its utter madness, thinks we are the mad ones." She paused, and her silvery laugh trickled forth. "Just because we insist upon being ourselves, like dear Angelina next to you. She loves red and her grandmother's styles. That impossible world outside would like nothing better than to force us to conform or take away our rights. So Heron and I decided the only intelligent thing would be to lock the world away, which we did, of course," she added with a slight shift of one shoulder. "All of us have our little weaknesses. Angelina has hers, I have mine, which I will not mention. So, of course, we all make proper and due allowances." Jan could only look at her, his senses reeling. Then he stammered, "Where is Elysium?" They were interrupted by a little cry from Ginny. "I just heard from Otis. Pops is on his way here. He's been driving around ever since dawn with Otis, waiting for him to wake up, so they must be close." The doll-faced Duchess clapped her hands. "Oh, I shall be so glad to see him," she exclaimed, accepting Ginny's announcement without question, as if it were a perfectly normal and routine matter for girls to pick up messages out of the blue. "Heron and I haven't had a good chat for months. I'm sure he'll arrive in time for breakfast. Presterville, set another place at... Presterville, what is wrong?" Jan was dumbfounded to see the portly majordomo backing across the room with his hands raised. There were quick, sharp commands, and Presterville and the remaining footmen and 2 cooks from the kitchen were herded against the opposite wall and made to face it, hands above their heads. Now Jan glimpsed a grim and very determined Belinsky coming from the kitchen area, a stubby pistol in his hand. Behind him, also armed and equally grim and determined, were Harry and the heavy-faced George. Sick inside, Jan turned and saw Big Doc, unshaven, coldly determined and desperate, approaching the other end of the table. He started to spin out of his chair, but froze to it as he made out the pistol in the doctor's plump hand. The pistol was quickly thrust against Sir Reginald's head. "Do not move, boy, or he will die," came the soft but entirely merciless voice. "Give us the least bit of trouble, and others will die. That goes for all of you at the table, so keep your seats. Helga?" Jan sensed movement behind him. He knew what was coming, and fury rose in him, a fury made all the worse because there was nothing whatsoever he could do without risking the lives of everyone here. As the cloth sack was jerked down over his head, and he felt the pressure of the all-too-familiar thumb against his neck, it flashed in his mind that the breakfast attack was a final move, brought about by complete desperation. It was the only possible move left, and it had to be successful. If it failed, Big Doc and Helga would dare not show their faces abroad, nor would there be any refuge for them here. Jan sagged abruptly and let himself go limp, pretending to be unconscious. Sorry. Pretending unconsciousness as the thumb dug viciously into his neck. Instantly, Helga released the pressure, pulled him from his chair, and dragged him to the other side of the table. Put him in the van, Harry, she ordered, the tightness of her fear and fatigue in her voice. I'll take the girl. I want her between us in the front seat when we leave. George, help the doctor and the Duchess. We'll all need her to get through the gate. Belinsky, follow us out and lock the doors. Let's go! As Harry flung him over the shoulders and ran, Jan was aware of a cry of protest from the Duchess, followed by the threatening sound of Belinsky's voice and the slamming of doors. The cloth sack over his head, which had not been tied, was jolted loose on their passage through the kitchen. With a little help from his hand, it fell off as they went through the rear door. No one seemed to notice. Outside, from his head-down position, he caught a brief glimpse of the van, nearly hidden under the trees, as Harry sped down a curving walk towards it. Following came Helga, forcing Ginny to run by twisting her arm behind her back. You know what? I want to read that paragraph again. Outside, from his head-down position, he caught a brief glimpse of the van, nearly hidden from the trees, as Harry sped down a curving walk toward it. Following came Helga, forcing Ginny to run by twisting her arm behind her back. Close behind were Big Doc and George, with a disheveled and badly frightened Duchess between them. Jan was trying desperately to think of some plan of action when he heard a car approaching somewhere in the distance on one of the lanes. Could it be Heron Road so soon? His sudden feeling of hope died on the instant when he realized that Heron, probably alone save for Otis, and unarmed, would have to contend with 4 determined men with guns who certainly would not hesitate to shoot down anyone who tried to stand between them and freedom. Helga also heard the car, for he saw her head jerk up in alarm, then she called hoarsely for the others to hurry, and gave Ginny's arm a sudden twist. Ginny gasped and stumbled. Helga slapped her viciously, and Ginny cried out in pain and fell. The agonized sound of Ginny's cry abruptly propelled Jan to movement. Before the astonished Harry quite knew what was happening, Jan had twisted like an eel from his grasp. He landed on hands and knees and sprang towards Helga with fury in his eye. If he had had the forgotten hatchet in his hand, which he had left at the fence, he might have hesitated. But he had only his empty hand, which he pointed trembling towards her, as if it were all the weapon he needed to stop her. Helga stiffened as if struck by a force beyond imagining. Her mouth fell open, and stayed open as a glazed look came over her face. Then her legs gave way, and she crumpled to the ground and sat there awkwardly, staring at nothing. Ginny cried a warning, and Jan whirled in time to escape a swing from Harry's pistol. He concentrated on the pistol, and the man backed away in fright, and suddenly gasped and dropped the weapon as if it had turned hot in his hand. Jan spun about and saw George gaping in disbelief at the crumpled Helga, his weapon and the Duchess forgotten. Behind him, a wide-eyed Belinsky was also staring at Helga, as if the world had all at once come to an end. Only Big Doc seemed in full possession of his senses. "Shoot him, you fools!" the big man ordered, tugging to free the pistol caught in the pocket of his soiled jacket. "Shoot him before he wrecks us all!" The pistol came free, and the plump hand tried to raise it, but abruptly it dropped even as Harry's had dropped, and a new voice ordered, "Leave him to me, Jan." No, that's not his voice. Leave him to me. Why, I can't get there. Sorry, we'll see if we end up finding Heron Rhodes' voice again, or maybe not. Not too much time left. Leave him to me, Jan. He's mine. Only now did Jan see the white rolls which had shot along. Ah, now I'm getting flustered. Only now did Jan see the white rolls, which had shot around the other side of the club building, demolishing a rose garden in its hasty progress. A very grim and haggard Heron Rhodes had leapt from it and was pointing a retributive finger at Big Doc. "It's all over, Zorkin," Heron snapped. Big Doc whitened and started backing away, no longer aware of his doll-faced hostage. "No, no, no," he pleaded, but the last no died as his mouth fell open and stayed open, and the flabby body began to sag. He fell on his knees and sprawled there, braced by his plump, limp hands, a great empty hulk, alive but uncomprehending. Even as Zorkin fell, the members of the constabulary were racing towards them through the trees, and Nat Martin and half a dozen agents were pouring from their cars. It was, indeed, all over. The morning sun, Jan saw, as he helped Ginny to her feet, was now shining brightly above the trees. "Certainly she's a real duchess," Heron Rhodes said one morning at breakfast, when everyone had recovered from the ordeal. "Marie of Bradisburg, or something like that. But all she has left today are the oil fields her husband left her. More than enough, however, to start Pine Ridge Sanitarium and build and maintain Elysium." Jan shook his head. I just couldn't believe it when I looked back that morning and saw the Pine Ridge sign over the main gate." "Well, it jolted me when I discovered where you were," Heron admitted. "I couldn't believe it either. You see, that old mansion wasn't part of the original Pine Ridge estate. I knew nothing about it. Zworkin's people bought it, fenced it to join the estate, then donated it to Pine Ridge after they got Zorkin established as a specialist for violent cases. Infiltration, that's what it was. The dang-eyed old rascals. All those fences. Oh, that place is fenced to glory. The tea house you found, that's for lesser members of the staff. The Duchess had it fenced off from the inner sanctum for privacy. You should see the tea house for the top members. As for the inner sanctum, Elysium, that's a world apart. No one enters except by invitation or an emergency. If you're a patient inside, no matter how dotty you are, you've got it made. Frankly, if the world gets any crazier when I get older." "Ah, Pops," Ginny protested. "Well, why not? When I consider it, Elysium strikes me as an eminently sane place. You must realize, of course, that no one can claim absolute sanity. Everyone's a bit off one way or another. But pshaw, that's nothing. You only have to read the daily headlines to realize the whole world's demented. Absolutely irrevocably." "Oh, Heron," Hecuba interrupted. "Will you get off—" Lost both of their voices. "Will you get off your soapbox and get on to Jan?" "I'm coming to him, my dear. Jan, I should tell you that we found all your records in Zorkin's files in the mansion. Added to what Sergeant Bricker and Bill Zorn have been able to dig up during the past week, we have the whole story. But just telling you isn't the right thing for you. It should come from your own mind. Now, by this time, you've no doubt there's Aragon blood in you." It's pretty evident," Jan mumbled. "I see you're still upset by what you did to Helga. Well, don't be. It's better that she and Leopold finish their lives as morons than locked up for a few years and turned loose to start up their rotten work all over again." "Maybe so," Jan admitted. "But I hate knowing that I have that awful ability." "That's good, for then you won't abuse it. You've read the book, so you know that no one of our blood ever has. You must look on it as something given to you for defense, like cat's claws. And you must remember that the power you generate depends upon the violence of your emotions. Take those blackbirds I used to kill when I was a kid. I did it only because they used to drive away the bluebirds. The very sight of one." Heron shrugged. "The thing is, you could never have brought Helga to her knees so quickly if Ginny hadn't meant so much to you." Ginny's cheeks began to pink, and Hecuba said quickly, "I was in the back seat of the car and saw it all. I know I'm vindictive, but I wouldn't have missed it for anything. And those doctors who've examined them simply can't understand. Otis wailed. When are you going to regress him? I want to know. We're not going to regress him, Heron said. We're simply going to ask him questions. I suggest, said Hecuba, that you let Jenny do the questioning. She was with him when he got that shock on the wall, and he knows what's been going on and she knows what's been going on in his mind. Ginny rubbed a freckle on her cheek, then said quietly, You've already put most of it together, Jan. But let's start with the Glendale station, where I first saw you. When you escaped that day and ran away, why were you so anxious to find the station? To meet you, he said. Sorry. To meet you, he said. Me? She exclaimed. But how? I had to get there before you left on the train, he told her. You see, you were the only clue I had in the world. I overheard Big Doc and Helga talking about the two of us, and I knew you'd be at the station on a certain day at a certain time. So getting to the station before you left became the most important thing in my life. But because of Matilda, I'd forgotten everything else by the time I got there. I had a feeling it was something like that, said Heron. But go on, pet. Ginny said, Tell me your mother's name again. Teresa. And your father's? Raoul. Your father's last name? Riggs. No, it can't be Riggs. Why not? Because Riggs is dead. You're sure? Of course I'm sure. I saw him killed. How was Riggs killed? Ginny asked very quietly. It happened on a bus. A small bus like a van with seats in the back. What happened? We were being taken somewhere at night. We'd been in a boys' home of some sort. Real tough place. But they were glad to get rid of us because Bryce was always causing trouble, and I was always running away. Polinsky was driving the bus, and Big Doc and Helga were following in a car. They'd given us shots to put us to sleep, but I woke up before Bryce did, and... Jan, what happened? The bus had stopped, and Big Doc came inside. He had what looked like a jack handle in his hand, and he hit Bryce with it. Then they took me out and let the bus run off the road, down what seemed like a high embankment. There was a silence. Then Heron said, We had an idea of something like that. Go on, son. That's all I know, because they gave me another shot, and when I woke up, I was in a tiny cell somewhere. Marysville, muttered Heron, because, having become Bryce Riggs, and a homicidal maniac according to your papers, well, as well as a state resident, you had to clear through them. Anyway, the next time I woke up, they were taking me out of Matilda, and I didn't know much of anything. I'd forgotten what had happened on the bus, and didn't remember it until after I got that shock on the wall. Then you started remembering your father, Ginny reminded him. What was his last name? Riggs. No, of course not. That's from Big Doc's tape recording that I had to listen to in my sleep. If you found out my full name, why don't you just tell me? Nah, said Otis aloofly. That would be poor therapy. You gotta do your own remembering. Ginny said, Your mother's name was Teresa? You know she was Spanish. Were you christened, Jan? No. She called me that because my father liked it, but she didn't write it that way in the Bible. How did she write it? Juan. Oh, I was really named Juan. How did she write the rest of it? I think it was T-R... Go on. Tremaine. There was a dead silence when they all looked at him. Tremaine, he said slowly. I'm Juan Tremaine, but who... Then his mouth came open in shock as he remembered. Why, I must be your cousin, the Tremaine cousin you told me about, that you thought had been killed. Yes, said Hecuba, dabbing quickly at her eyes. You're the last Tremaine. They disguised it as Aragon in the book, but the real last name is Tremaine. Our mother was one, so you're our family. You must call me Cousin Heck. You're not calling me Cousin Heron, growled her brother. You're calling me Pops like the others do. Ginny smiled tremendously and touched his hand under the table. Welcome home, she said. And there we are at the end. So, lots of interesting little bits there. And, even though it's, a book for kids, I'm not sure if the last chapter holds up, but, it's the kind of thing of it feels like there should have been more or less. I don't know. But so yeah, there's lots of little bits in there that I can see why I like that book so much. The idea of something, of course, the idea of being special, that's, classic to every children's book, but, or young adult book, I should say, but also, the little bits and pieces, interestingly enough, not trusting the police, but also trusting the police. And they would have found him a lot sooner if Pops hadn't assumed that the place he knew was he knew about Elysium, and he had discounted that as being one of the places that they could be holding Jan at the time, because of course they wouldn't be. They I don't know. It's kind of all over the place, but lots of little tidbits here and there. Curious to know what all of you think. And now that brings this to a conclusion, we can go back to working on the Nintendo Labo next time, before I got super obsessed with this. Thanks for coming by, and I will catch you all later.